Good morning and welcome to Bible Light, bringing you Bible Light on today's pathway. This is Pastor Cordell Baker of the Independent Baptist Church speaking. I'm going to be speaking to you this morning on the subject of giants, of grapes, and grasshoppers. You'll find my message in the 15th chapter of the book of Numbers. But first, this message and song.
Oh, I speak of matchless word. Oh, fullness of the glorious earth, which in my Savior shine. I soar above star heavenly strings, and now the day will wind his wings. In notes of most divine, in notes of most divine, I sing of precious blood he spilled. My ransom from the river hill, of sin and wrath behold. I sing the glorious righteousness, in which the perfect heavenly rest my soul shall ever shine, my soul shall ever shine. Well, one delightful day will come, when my reward will bring me home, and I shall sing his praise. Then with my Savior promised and God rest eternity on stand. Triumphant in his grace, triumphant in his grace.
The story of this passage, of course, is the children of Israel as a nation have come out of Egypt. They have followed Moses down through the Sinai Peninsula, through the desert, past the rock or the mountain Horeb, Mount Sinai, where they've received the law at the hand of Moses, and then they have marched northward until they are right at the very southern border of the promised land, the land that God wanted them to take, the land that God wanted them to have. And at that point, they stop. And there are two stories in the Bible as to the spies that were sent forth. And to really understand them, you have to take them together. One is in the book of Deuteronomy. We won't turn there. The other is the one that's before us. And when we compare the two, it becomes apparent that as they stopped there, the children of Israel, many of these people and their leaders, cried out to Moses and to God, and they said, we want to send in spies to look this land over, to decide what it's like and whether we can take it. Now, it was not God's original intention that spies be sent out, but sometimes God will give us exactly what we ask for. We did not look at this passage as we followed the journey of the children of Israel through the wilderness, but there came a day when they cried out and wanted flesh to eat. And God gave them flesh. He gave them all the quails they could possibly eat. And then while the flesh was still between their teeth, many of them died as a result of it. They got what they asked for. And oftentimes we'll find that we get what we ask for. I have seen children in homes that continually pester their parents until they get what they ask for. Sometimes it's not the best thing for them. I have seen Christians who sometimes have asked for things from God that were not in their best interest. But if they keep crying and asking long enough, God will sometimes give it to them. And that's what happened here. They asked that they might send in spies to look over the land to find out whether or not they could take it. God's intention was that they simply march in and take it. And so God, in his permissive will, allowed them to choose out spies to go into the land. 10 of them brought back an evil report. 2 of them brought back a good report. 2 of them came back reporting that the land was good and that God would surely give it to them. And 10 said, well, the land is good, but it's not for us. And they were ready to turn back into the wilderness and even back to Egypt. Now, here we have them then at Kadesh Barnea. They're right on the southern edge. It was militarily a logical jumping off point. It was the logical way to go. It was the sensible way to go. And they could easily have gone ahead and conquered this land as God intended them to do, but they didn't. Now that leads us then to look at the passage itself with a little more detail. And I want you first of all to notice in verse 24 the grapes. The place was called the Brook of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes which the children of Israel cut down from thence. From our Bible reading earlier, you remember that the spies had gone up all through the land. They had looked it all over very carefully, and on their way back, they had stopped at this place, which was just a few miles north of Kadesh Barnea, and there in that valley they had found grapes that were just absolutely tremendous. I mean, they were really something. Clusters of grapes so big that it took 2 men to carry them, or I don't know whether there was, apparently they cut down the whole vine too and brought the whole thing along, but it was big enough to where it required 2 men to carry them. That seems almost preposterous to us. I don't know of any place in the Western Hemisphere where grapes that size grow. I have seen grapes in the market of Jerusalem that were as big around as ping pong balls. So I can rather imagine this. They grow grapes there like you wouldn't believe over in this part of the world. And so here they come back and they report, they say, here is the fruit of the land. And I want you to notice as you look at that passage that all 12 of these spies agreed that that was the fruit of the land. They all agreed that that was what kind of a land it was. That it was a very fruitful land indeed. And it is. That land, even to this day, is one of the most productive and fruitful lands that you'll find any place on the face of the earth. I have had the privilege of staying on a large kibbutz farm in the area of the Sea of Galilee. And you farmers will wonder at this, but they cut 11 cuttings of alfalfa to feed their cattle every year. I've never heard of a farmer in the United States of America that got more than 4. And I grew up cutting the hay too, so I know what I'm talking about. But think of that, 11 cuttings of alfalfa they can cut for their cattle. And not only is that true, that they can grow that much cattle feed for their cattle, right on the same plantations they grow bananas, they grow dates, they could even grow coconuts. I don't know for sure that they do, but they could do it. And they grow just about every kind of fruit and vegetable you can imagine. The Egyptians were famous as far as the Israelites were concerned for their onions, garlics, and leeks. Let me tell you something, in Israel today they grow leeks and onions that would probably make Egypt look sick. It is one of the most marvelous places you have ever seen. One of the most fruitful places. And even the parts of the land that look like they would be relatively unfruitful actually are. You may go through the hill country of Judea and Samaria, and you would think that nothing would be able to be grown there. And yet to this day you'll see that those mountains are terraced from the bottom clear to the top. And at one time it was obvious that before the Arabs came along and neglected the land so terribly, that it supported vast populations of people with fruits and vegetables in tremendous amounts. It's a great land for grazing, for cattle and for sheep and goats. A tremendous place indeed. The climate is just absolutely outstanding. And so here came these people back with an example of this. Here is this vine with this one great huge cluster of grapes, and they say, here is the fruit of that land. You know, the same thing holds true oftentimes with people in their everyday lives and in their experience with regard to the Christian life. They can look around and they can see that there's some real fruit to the Christian life. And I'm talking now about a Christian life that is really a dedicated life, not talking just simply about those who profess to be Christians and walk their own way, pay no attention to it. There's fruit in it. You betcha there is. There is a quality of life there to be found that can't be found anywhere else. And very few people who have good sense do not see that that's true. You just simply have to look and you can see it's true. You watch and see the hope on the face of a Christian when he faces times of heartache and sorrow and difficulty. A hope that is not there on the part of the unsaved. I remember one day when I had to preach a funeral sermon for a young fellow from our church who had been in an automobile accident and killed, and large congregation there, probably 300 or 400 people at least. And we came back to a church building for a time of fellowship after the funeral. And in spite of the sorrow of losing a loved one, here were Christian people who were rejoicing that they knew that this young fellow was absent from the body and present with the Lord. And I'll never forget how there was a young fellow there that he wasn't a member of the family, he was just a member from the community. He knew these people casually, and so he came. And he came by me with a very puzzled look on his face, and he said, "I don't understand this." I said, "What is it you don't understand?" He says, "I don't understand why this is a funeral. We've just been out to a funeral, and these people are happy." As if it was a crime to be happy. And I said, "Well, wait a minute." I said, "The thing you don't understand is that these people are Christians. These people have a hope beyond the grave. And they know that the body of that young fellow that we buried this afternoon is not him. That he's absent from the body and present with the Lord." And I said, "That makes a difference." He walked off with still a very puzzled look on his face. He couldn't understand it. And yet he could see obviously the difference. See? He could see the difference. And many people can see that there is a real joy in walking with the Lord. There is a sense of serenity that comes from knowing that you're doing what's right, that a lot of people would like to have. We sometimes as Christians, we sometimes misunderstand people, and a lot of the times we get down on people because they get out and mess up their minds with hard drugs and booze and stuff like that. Well, I don't condone that kind of actions. Please understand me there. But sometimes we fail to realize that the reason they do that is because they can't stand to really face life. They can't stand to really live life as it really is. It's too painful for them. And they're out there messing up their minds with these things simply because they cannot stand life as it really is. That's the difference. The real dedicated Christian can look life right in the face, and he can have joy in spite of the difficulties and hardships. That's part of the fruit of it. And I've seen many a person who has looked this all over and he says, yeah, I see the fruit of it. I can see the fruit of a life of faith. I can see that it must be a wonderful thing to be a Christian. It must be a wonderful thing to be able to really live for the Lord. But yet they hold back. I've given you this illustration before, but I think it bears repeating right here. Several years ago, my wife and I and our children were camped up in Mount Rainier in Washington State, and right next door to in the campsite to a fellow that had one of the biggest, fanciest camping rigs I ever saw in my life. I mean, it was one of these that today you'd pay $100,000 for. And we were camped in our little carry-all in which I had a slip-in unit that I had built myself. It wasn't much, but at least we could camp in it. And we did all our cooking outside and everything. And we were just having a blast. We were having the time of our lives. And I got acquainted with this fellow over next door and got talking with him one day. And he began to tell me a little bit of his life. But first he had asked me what we were doing and what I did for a living. And I told him that I was the pastor of this little church up in Bellingham, Washington. And talked a little bit more about the things of the Lord. And immediately I saw that there was tears begin to well up in his eyes. Now this guy, financially, he was set. He had retired completely at 50 years of age. He was a building contractor, and he was totally retired. He had enough money to live the rest of his life without ever turning a tap. And he and his wife were out just going from one national park to another. That's all they had to do, you know, I mean. And here he stood there in front of his $100,000 rig and all the nice things that he had available to him, and he's crying. And I probed a little bit, and I discovered that he put it this way. He said, you know, I wish I had done something like that. And then he began to tell me about his past life. And here he was telling me about all these great things that he had accomplished in the physical realm, but he had totally missed it spiritually. And so I turned the conversation and began to talk to him about the Lord Jesus Christ. And they invited him to be saved. He put it off. And finally realizing that he was not going to make a decision for Christ then, I knew he was going to be up at a national park not very far from us a little bit later, and so I pled with him. I invited him to come by and visit us. And he made the promise that he would come and attend our services. But he never showed up. Never showed up. Now he saw the fruit. He knew that what we had was what he wanted. He knew that the Christian life had something to offer that he was not experiencing now. And yet, in a sense, he came to Kadesh Barnea and he saw something that turned him aside. And he never went over into the land of promise. The grapes are there. The fruit of the Christian life is evident if we'll just look. But for many, they see the giants. And I find it very interesting to notice here the story of these spies who came back. They said, the place, this is the fruit of it. It's a wonderful, fruitful place. But we also saw the giants up there. It says, and they brought back an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search, it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so were we in their sight. We saw the giants in the land. In other words, what these guys are saying is, this is a very fruitful place. It's a very fruitful place, but there are problems over there. There are problems over there that are going to make it difficult for us to take it. And it's the same way with a lot of people who look at the fruit of the Christian life and they say, sure, it looks like real Christian people are happy, joyful people. They enjoy the things of God. But you know, there's some problems there. What am I going to tell my bosom buddy, my friend over at school? Or what am I going to tell the people that I work with if I become a Christian? Or what's it going to do to my social life if I become a Christian? What's it going to do with regard to my financial aspirations? Am I going to be able to go on in the kind of life and business that I've anticipated going into? There are giants out there, and I don't know what to do with them. And so they get their eyes on the giants instead of on the grapes. You know, one of the problems that a lot of people have is that they fail to realize that the reason the giants are over there is because the grapes are there too. The giants have got some sense. And the giants are over there because the grapes are there. And, you know, you're never going to get the grapes without the giants along with it. That's just part of life. And that's always the way it is. You never find anything that is really worth having in life that doesn't make you pay a little bit of a price, right? Oh, you watch the boys here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You know, you see the teenage boys run around flexing their muscles, showing their big biceps and all that sort of thing. Never seen one yet that didn't. Or they're down, when they get in junior high, they're down in the basement jumping to see if they can touch the ceiling and all that. What they're doing, you see, is they're showing off all their muscles. And sure, they've got them, and I'm glad for them. But you know, they didn't get them that way without some effort, did they? You don't get those things without some effort. If you're going to have some big biceps, you're going to have to pump some iron. It's very simple. If you're going to have strong legs, you're going to have to walk, and you're going to have to run. It's true with almost anything in life. There are very few little plums that just fall right down to us. There's a price to be paid somewhere along the line. And the reason the giants are over there that we so easily get our eyes on is because that's where the grapes are. And we need to recognize that if we're going to have the grapes, we're going to have to get past the giants. And we may as well face up to it and go to it. And let me tell you something, that if you're going to have the kind of peace and contentment, the kind of life that you'll really enjoy, you're going to have to face the giants. You're going to have to look at those influences in the world. You're going to have to look at those things that look so formidable and say, I'm going to let God have my life, and I'm going to serve Him regardless of what may be the cost. Because He is able, well able, to give me the victory. You know, there's an interesting contrast in verses 30 and 31. Did you notice these? Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Now notice the next verse, and you find almost exactly the same sentence, but there's one word that's different. But the men went up with him said, we be not able to go up against the people. You see the difference? In the one sentence, Caleb says, we are well able. In the case of the others, they said, we are not able. Just one little word, but what a difference it makes in the sentence. And we just simply need to come to the point in our lives where we will go along with Caleb and Joshua and say, I'm well able to do it. And I've known a lot of people who have backed off from the Christian life just simply saying, I can't do it. I can't live it. I can't live it. I've had more than one tell me that they would love to be able to live the Christian life, but they say, I just can't do it. My answer to that is, of course you can't. No one ever has had the ability in himself. You can't do it. And certainly as long as you've got your eyes on the giants, it is an impossibility. But if God is with you, then with Caleb and Joshua, you can say, we are well able to overcome. We are well able to overcome. Let's look beyond the giants for a moment, and this is one of the problems we see is the grasshoppers. In verse 33, and there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come from the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. The problem, you see, was when these people saw the giants, they got their eyes on the giants, and all they could do was crick their necks and look up at these big fellows. Actually, they'd been a lot better if they'd just stepped back a little ways and looked at them from a distance. They don't look quite so formidable then, right? But they just looked up at them and they said, boy, I am so little. I'm so little. I'm just the size of a grasshopper. And once they had made an admission like that, they were done. They were done. How much better off they'd have been if they'd have been looking at the grapes instead of the giants, right? But they're looking at the giants, and because they look at the giants, they see themselves, and we see here a picture of the self-image of the faithless. Now, there is a sense in which we need to see ourselves as nothing, but there's also a sense in which we need to see ourselves as possessing everything. You follow me? If we're going to look at the Christian life and its obstacles and its problems and figure that we've got to take care of the thing all by ourselves, then believe you me, we're in trouble when we need to see ourselves as nothing at that point. But then we need to see that whatever God has commanded has given us the ability, and now we see everything in us that is necessary to overcome. And the last thing that we ought to have is the kind of self-image that says, I'm a grasshopper. I got all of these obstacles. I got all of these formidable giants that stop me from doing what I know I ought to do. And I'm just a grasshopper. Grasshoppers need to get their eyes on the grapes. If you're going to spend all the time chewing on the grass, they're never going to get to the grapes. And so what we're just simply trying to say this morning is that if you and I expect to live the Christian life, we've got to look away from the giants, get our eyes on the grapes, the fruit of the land, and then see ourselves not as grasshoppers, but see ourselves as those people unto whom God has given the ability so that we can say with Joshua, we are well able to overcome.
Faithfulness, O God, my Father, there is no shadow of turning with Thee. Thou changest not, Thy compassions, they fail not. As Thou hast been, Thou forever wilt be. Great is Thy faithfulness, great is Thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, Thy hand hath provided. Great is Thy faithfulness.
It's the faithfulness of an unchanging, everlasting God who makes it possible for us to look beyond the giants and see the grapes of the Christian life. I hope you know the Lord Jesus Christ and the pardoning of sin. If you don't, I'd love to help you to come to know him whom to know is life eternal. Write me at Box 784 or call 882-4933. We invite you to fellowship with us also today in our regular services at the Independent Baptist Church. Our Sunday school meets at 9:45. The morning worship is at 11. And the evening gospel service at 6 o'clock. Until the same time next week, we bid you goodbye, and we trust that God will richly bless your life and bring you, if you have not come to know him yet, to know Jesus Christ and the pardoning of sin.
Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thy own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings are mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness.